Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Adele. Let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Countdown to Bond 25 here on Thumb Together. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. Today, we are talking Skyfall, and I am at a loss for where to even begin because there's so much to talk about here. Despite being one of the most thematically complex Bond films, Skyfall has one of the most simple plots. A former MI6 agent has been tortured into madness, and now he wants revenge on M. That's it. You can sum it up in a tweet. That is unheard of for a Bond film. It also happens to be an anniversary film. You see, Skyfall came out in November 2012, marking the 50th anniversary of this entire franchise. Because remember, Dr. No came out way back in 1962. So in the same way that Die Another Day was supposed to be this big special event because it was the 20th film, Skyfall was a big special event because it was the 50th anniversary. And this time, they delivered on that promise of specialness tenfold. The song of Skyfall doesn't really even need an introduction. It is the song by Adele, and I mean, what can be said about this song that has not already been said? I'm not even an Adele fan. I don't like her stuff. I love her Skyfall song. It is the most quintessential James Bond song that I think has ever been written by anyone, with the exception of like John Barry's orchestral stuff. The only thing I can say that I don't think I've heard anybody say yet is that Skyfall is so good and so timeless. Even though it's a song that was released in 2012, it sounds like it would have fit perfectly in one of the early 60s Sean Connery films. And considering that this is an anniversary film and it's supposed to kind of tie back and remind us of the origins of this whole thing, that is as close to perfection as a song can possibly get. And now, as a special treat for you, I will sing Skyfall in its entirety. I'm messing with you. That's not going to happen. That's all I can do. We have one first in Skyfall, and it is a big one. It's the first time in the whole franchise that somebody drops an F-bomb. Yep, our first and only F-bomb was dropped by Dame Judi Dench as M, and I think that's the perfect person to give the F-bomb to. If anybody in this series is gonna drop that, it's gonna be Judi Dench. And what I love about it is that it's so subtle, I didn't even realize it until rewatching it for the Countdown to Bond 25 just now. I have seen this movie a bunch of times, and that completely flew under my radar because they don't make a big moment of it. They don't like zoom in on her and she's like, no, they just keep it subtle. It's something she mumbles under her breath, but it's so perfect. It really just sums up the specialness of this film. Something that's not entirely special, but that's the point, would be the gadgets. Because we finally get Q back in this rebooted Daniel Craig James Bond universe. We haven't had a Q until now, and he's played by Ben Whishaw, and he makes an excellent new Q. He fills in Desmond Llewellyn's shoes pretty well. Even though we've only had him for a couple movies, I like this Q. And when he meets James Bond for the first time, he gives him his first set of Q branch gadgets, which are a Walther PPK with a special hand grip and a radio transceiver. As James Bond says, a gun and a radio, not exactly Christmas. But that's the point of these movies. Now, you could also argue that another gadget Bond ends up having, even though it's not something Q gives him, is his classic Aston Martin DB5. It's still got the hood-mounted machine guns. It's still got the ejector seat and the gear shift. It is everything you could want in a James Bond Aston Martin DB5. So I included it here. And what a great little callback for this anniversary special to have that in there. God, this movie it's so special. That's the word for it. It is the most special James Bond movie ever made. Another thing that makes this movie special is that we have two secondary Bond ladies, but we don't have a primary Bond lady. At least, not quite. The first one we meet is a fellow MI6 agent by the name of Eve, played by Naomi Harris. And Eve is this really cool lady who's good in the field, but she's not amazing. She's not the best shot. And so you can tell that something... I can't even really talk about Eve without spoiling this whole motion picture. So I'm not going to talk about Eve too much. Then when we get to Macau, James Bond meets the second lady of the picture, Severine, played by Berenice Marlowe. Severine is a femme fatale with those scary, evil fingernails, but she's not evil. She's kind of a slave to the villains, and James tries to help her. Whether or not he succeeds is an entirely different story, but here's a hint. Severine is not in the movie for very long, because the leading lady of Skyfall is James Bond's boss. It's M. And this is not a romantic relationship. Again, this movie is so friggin' special. Now let's meet the villains, because why not? We have a great henchman in the form of Patrice. Patrice is just a sharpshooting assassin who's got a crazy sniper rifle, and he's got a gun that looks like it's got a set of testicles, but those testicles are really giant drums holding, I think, 100 rounds of ammunition. Patrice is really scary. He feels like a James Bond type of character, just working for the bad guys. And the fight between Bond and Patrice, oh my god, somebody needs to put that fight in a museum, because it is gorgeous. Our main villain is Javier Bardem's very sinister ex-MI6 agent, Tiago Rodriguez, also known by his new name, Silva. I don't know why his name is changed. I think that's the thing the agents do, but regardless, he's just known as Silva. And Javier Bardem is having the time of his life playing this guy. He is hamming it up in the best possible way, giving us one of the most sinister, comic booky type villains that the Bond franchise has had in a long time. Now, a lot of people say Silva falls under the same trap as like the Dark Knight's Joker or Khan from Star Trek Into Darkness, where it's just like he is too perceptive. You know, he plans a million steps ahead to the point where it just seems unfathomable. So that has been a big point of contention with Silva, but I don't think it bothers me all that much, especially because he's supposed to be an ex-MI6 agent, so I would assume he is good at sort of improvising and finding his way through things. So the Silva stuff doesn't bother me as much as it bothers other people. Even the death traps are special in Skyfall, or should I just say death trap? There is only one, but they flip the tables on us again, because it's not the villain who has a death trap this time. It's James Bond. James Bond sets a trap for his enemies, and that trap is Skyfall itself. What is Skyfall? I don't know if I want to say out loud, just in case you haven't seen the movie. But if you're anything like me, once you find out what Skyfall actually is, you're going to have a big old smile on your face. Bond gets the best quote of the picture in what is one of the best quotes of the whole franchise, frankly. It's when he's meeting Silva face to face for the first time, and Silva hints that he is attracted to James Bond. I mean, have you seen Daniel Craig's piercing blue eyes? Who would not be? And Silva starts to put the moves on James, and he's checking out James's muscles and rubbing James's leg and giving him the eye, and Silva says, "First time for everything, yes?" And James stares right back at him, smiles, and says, "What makes you think this is my first time?" Now, I have heard that the studio wanted them to take this line out. The studio, because studios are famously known for their wise decisions when it comes to filmmaking, they decided that they were too afraid of making even the slightest hint that James Bond may have had a homosexual encounter at one point in his life. But the producers and the screenwriters fought for it. They kept the line in, and lo and behold, I know this is going to shock the hell out of you when you hear this, but the studio was proved wrong. I know. I need a minute to digest that. Because when audiences heard that line for the first time, there were stories of people in the theaters going nuts. They were applauding, they were cheering, some people were standing up. That was a big moment. I don't know if I've hammered this point home yet, but Skyfall is kind of a special movie. The action in the opening sequence takes place in Istanbul, and I think that that's another really cool kind of anniversary touch that they did, because as far as I can tell, Istanbul is the place that has been visited by James Bond the most. This is his third time being there now after The World Is Not Enough and From Russia With Love. We also get to see Macau and Shanghai, which look gorgeous, and then our final third act, which all takes place on the beautifully dour and spooky moors of Scotland. And now I want to talk about Scotland for a minute, because we get a character played by Albert Finney named Kincaid, who is a man who knew James Bond back when James was still a little boy. And Kincaid is interesting because there's a whole lot of whispers about the process, the production of Skyfall. And up until very late in the game, Kincaid was going to be a whole different character. Because what they were pushing for, to really hammer home the specialness of it all and the 50th anniversary-ness of it all, is they wanted this Scottish character, this old Scottish man who was also a badass and helped James Bond out, to be played by an old Scottish man who actually used to be James Bond. They asked Sean Connery to come play this role. Unfortunately, Sean Connery had retired and he didn't want to play the part, and there was some struggle trying to get him to acquiesce, and then eventually they just sort of changed the character entirely and went with this Kincaid thing. I don't know, it's a chicken and egg situation. I don't know what came first. Did Connery just keep turning them down, or did they just end up changing the character to begin with? It's a bit hard to find out exactly what went down, but there's rumors of that. There's also rumors, I don't even know how founded these are, but there are also rumors I have heard that the third act would involve a retirement home for ex-00 agents, and that not only would Sean Connery be there, but every other previous Bond as well. Now, I think Skyfall is fabulous just the way it is. However, I can't help but put on my Marvel what if hat for a minute and just wonder, God, would I ever love to visit the parallel universe where that Skyfall got made and watch the Skyfall where Daniel Craig walks into a room to be greeted by Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, and Pierce Brosnan. I think I would have a brain aneurysm. I don't think I'd be able to handle it. It'd be too much joy for me. And a lot of fans who have heard this rumor seem split down the middle. Some of them say that's way too crazy and they're glad they didn't go down that road, and others just think wistfully like I do and imagine that they might have really, really liked that turn. I don't know. What do you think? If you want to comment below about it, what would you have rather seen? I think there's a way that they could have done that whole James Bond reunion really, really well, and there's a way that I think they could have done it really, really poorly, and that's what I think scares a lot of people. So I'm happy with the Skyfall we got, but I'll never stop dreaming of the Skyfall that could have been. And I think the main reason that I am so happy with the Skyfall we got is because this just feels like no other Bond picture we have ever gotten. You know how in the 90s when they started hitting that trend where they started making big budget movies of TV shows from the past, like they made a Flintstones movie, they made a Mission Impossible movie, and it felt really special. It felt like, wow, they're making the movie of this thing that usually only existed on TV. Skyfall makes it feel as if every other James Bond film has just been a bunch of episodes of one TV show, and now this is the movie. This is the special one where everything is turned up to 11 and they turn the story on its head and do things you don't expect because it's so unformulaic. We get something that has never been seen before while at the same time celebrating everything that we already have. And that goddamn ending where Bond opens that door and we see what he sees and we see who he sees, and Eve is there, but she's not just Eve, and Ralph Fiennes is there, and you see it all come into formation, and you realize what it is you've been watching. I cannot begin to properly explain how this made me feel. It has been almost 10 years, and I am still at a loss for words for the specialness that is the final scene of Skyfall. If the James Bond series is one giant Ouroboros, Skyfall is the point of the Ouroboros where the snake's head and tail meet. It is inarguably glorious. So how do you follow up something like Skyfall? You better do something special, because this is a tough act to follow. Thankfully, they did do something special. They finally secured the rights to bring back the most classic of Bond villains from days yore. They finally bring back Spectre. And we'll be right there to talk about it tomorrow when the countdown to Bond 25 not only continues, but concludes.